Hello and welcome to the Automation Show. I'm Michael Mintz, and today we're going to be covering ChatGPT in GitHub Actions, and we're also going to be comparing Playwright with SeleniumBase. So let's get started with a live demo to kick things off. We're going to run Python raw chatgpt.py from the SeleniumBase CDP examples folder. And we're going to do a query, compare Playwright to SeleniumBase in under 178 words. And then the script is going to find the output and then display the output inside here. So you can see here, we bypassed any anti-bot defenses that ChatGPT had, and we scraped the data. And we can also do this exact same thing from GitHub Actions, as you can see here. This is right from the repo I have called Undetected Testing. So you can see it made a ChatGPT query and it printed out the output. And if you're wondering where that is, you can just go to the MD Mints area and then Undetected Testing. Here we are, Undetected Testing, where I have lots of examples that people can run, and many of these examples are being run inside of GitHub Actions. So for instance, if we go to CI build 3, that is another example where we're running other ones such as data that grabs Nike shoe prices as well as prices from the Priceline website. Now, getting back to the presentation, this is based on my previous presentation, Unlimited Free Web Scraping with GitHub Actions, which was actually so popular that memes were generated in various Discord channels, such as the Scraping Enthusiasts, which you can find on Discord. Quite a popular place. There's usually over 1,000 people online at the same time. And if we go into this meme that someone created there, it was basically comparing the Virgin API consumer to Chad Independent Scraper. And this, of course, is based on an earlier meme where the Virgin API consumer essentially has to use tokens and API keys in order to grab the data, and all the actions that that person does are seen and known by the API provider, whereas Chad Independent Scraper can bypass those limitations by going directly through the HTML. And the SeleniumBase Automation Framework is one of those frameworks that lets you bypass CAPTCHAs and anti-bot detection so that you can grab any data that you want. So that's how this meme came about, and it became so popular that more memes were generated after that, such as this one with a Simpsons reference here, 0 days without GitHub Actions mentioned. And essentially, anytime someone mentioned GitHub Actions in that Discord server, this meme came up. So that brings us back to this presentation. And also note that it's not just SeleniumBase and GitHub Actions that can scrape data from ChatGPT. Also, other companies such as DeepSeek have also been able to scrape OpenAI data. And here is another meme that was generated from that. OpenAI complaining about DeepSeek using ChatGPT for its training. And here's the scene from Princess Bride where the Sicilian is basically holding the princess hostage, and then he's saying, "You're trying to kidnap what I've rightfully stolen." So essentially, there's a war going on between all these AI platforms, but likely if DeepSeek gets too powerful, then it'll probably get banned from countries such as the US, where OpenAI is supposed to be the AI leader. Or don't tell Google Gemini that, because they're in the running too for that top spot for AI. Let's jump off to the browser races, where we're getting to the next part of the presentation, where we're going to be comparing the speed of various browser automation frameworks. So in this example here, we have a horse race between Selenium, Playwright, and Cypress. And technically, all these browser automation frameworks can essentially represent a jockey driving a horse. But in this example, the horse is the web browser, and in this particular image here, these are different flavors of Chrome and Chromium. So for most Selenium tests, it's probably going to be using a regular Chrome browser, whereas Playwright and Cypress are going to be using a customized Chromium-based browser for their races. And here's another action shot of those going through the race. Selenium, Playwright, and Cypress driving their Chromium browsers, and by the end of the race, you'll have found that essentially there are really two main winners. Selenium and Playwright because both are pretty much the fastest automation frameworks there are in comparison to all the others out there. Although technically Puppeteer is Playwright in a way also super fast, but we're only going to talk about these two mainly because they're the most popular ones for test automation. So let's get to the data where we're going to be comparing all these metrics of Playwright versus SeleniumBase. And I have a nice repo for that, mdmints/playwright versus SeleniumBase, where I'm basically recording all this data, and there are all these examples that are being used, and they're being run inside the GitHub Actions here. You can see here all these builds for Windows, Ubuntu, and Mac OS. And if you go through the data here, you'll find that starting with Linux, SeleniumBase and Playwright are relatively close to each other depending on what you're doing. So with a browser launch, SeleniumBase was a little faster, but running an individual test, Playwright was a bit faster. But if you're running multiple tests at the same time, then SeleniumBase was able to win that race. So let's go over to the GitHub Actions job for that. So for instance, I ran every test 3 times so that we could get an average, or actually the median of the data. Made it easy. So for instance, if we have SeleniumBase launching a headless browser here, here, and here, and then we have Playwright launching a headless browser here, here, and here, I was able to collect all the metrics, grab the median number, and put that into the chart that you saw there. So if we jump all the way to the headless multi one, so for instance here you can see 3 tests passed in 1.12 seconds, and also here 3 passed in 1.09 seconds. This is for SeleniumBase. However, when Playwright ran the same scripts, it was a little bit slower. So for here, 3 passed in 1.70 seconds, or here 3 passed in 1.68 seconds, showing that when you're running multiple tests at the same time, SeleniumBase had a slight advantage over Playwright. However, when we go over to the Mac runtimes comparisons, SeleniumBase had a significant advantage over Playwright. You can see here with the runtimes, SeleniumBase was significantly faster than Playwright when running multiple tests, and still a bit faster when running individual tests. So if we go over to the GitHub Actions that I grabbed that data for, we'll jump right to the headless multi launches. And I'm going to show you the code for these scripts in a sec just so that you can see the comparison. You have 3 tests running and going to different URLs, and then printing out the URL to the console output. So here you see 0.79 seconds, and here 3 passed in 0.90 seconds. And then if we open up the Playwright version of the same scripts, you'll see that it took significantly longer. 3 passed in 2.17 seconds, or 3 passed in 2.24 seconds. So jumping back over to the repo here, all those numbers are in the chart here. So now let's take a look at the tests. So for instance, with the SB headless flow, we're running a script and we're grabbing the runtime using the runtime decorator I have, where we're going to print the runtime for all these actions and then run it here. And the equivalent for the Playwright version is here, PW headless flow. So it's the same script that SeleniumBase ran, except that it's using Playwright instead. So it's going to do all the exact steps, and it's also going to grab the runtime and print that out. And that's how I'm printing out the runtimes. And then if we jump over to something such as SB headless multi, you'll see that it's running 3 different tests. It's going to go to a URL and then print the current URL to the console output for those 3 different tests. And the same thing is happening with the Playwright headless multi example. It's going to go to those 3 different URLs and print out the URL to the console. So that was the data that we were collecting from the tests that we ran. And all that is shown here. Also note that I didn't have the Windows stats here yet. However, after I looked into the Windows stats from GitHub Actions, Playwright was a little faster than SeleniumBase in that particular area. So we go to Windows, let's go over to the headless multi one where we have multiple tests running at the same time. Here's the stats for SeleniumBase. Here's like 3 passed in 2.29 seconds. And if we compare that to the Playwright version, 3 passed in 2.09 seconds. So Playwright was a bit faster on Windows. So essentially, whoever wins the race depends on the operating system that you're using. So for instance, if you're using Linux, it'll be a close call depending on what you're doing. If you're using Mac OS, then SeleniumBase is going to be faster than Playwright. And if you're using Windows, then Playwright is going to be faster than SeleniumBase. So these are the stats, and you can run all these examples yourself. We can also run it directly from the console output here. So let's do Python raw pw headless multi to run the Playwright version of that script. It's going to go through, it's going to run it, and oh wow, that was slow for Playwright. But usually there's some caching involved if you run it more than once, so if you run it again, it should be a little faster. Oh, there we go. 3 passed in 4.60 seconds. Let's run again. Okay, 3.77 seconds for that, so that's the Playwright version. And now we're going to run the same thing but using SeleniumBase. And here, 3 passed in 2.00 seconds. Let's run it again. Oh, there we go. 3 passed in 1.28 seconds. Always varies by a bit. There's some fluctuations in internet. 3 passed in 1.46 seconds. So if we open up the scripts here, let's do raw sb headless multi, open raw sb headless multi, just so you can see that I've got the script there. And now we're going to open raw pw headless multi. And you can see here that it's essentially the same thing, but using its respective web automation frameworks. So they're going to be using PyTest for both of these. And the comparison shows that SeleniumBase was on top, at least on Mac OS, where SeleniumBase has a significant advantage. So that's comparing Playwright and SeleniumBase in terms of performance. And all this you can find in the GitHub area, Playwright versus SeleniumBase. You can see all the example scripts as well as the GitHub Actions jobs that record the data. And for the final part of this presentation, let's go through the raw ChatGPT script that I ran earlier, which basically queried ChatGPT. So I'm essentially doing this from SeleniumBase import SB, and then I'm going to call with SB, use equals true, test equals true, add block equals true as SB. And then I'm going to set the URL, and then I'm going to activate CDP mode, which is the stealthy mode that allows you to bypass CAPTCHAs as well as bot detection systems. Now I'm just going to sleep for a second just so that it's not running too fast and gets rate limited, etc. Because sometimes if automation clicks too fast, even if they don't detect your bot, they might think that it's a bot simply because it's clicking too fast. And I'm going to click a thing if it's visible, the closed dialog box, because sometimes there's like a pop-up that appears, announcing some ChatGPT feature or something like that. And we can just click it if it's visible. And then we're going to do this query, compare Playwright to SeleniumBase in under 178 words. And then I'm going to use the press keys method to slowly type out all those characters into this element with this CSS selector. And then I'm going to click on the send button, and then I'm going to print input for ChatGPT, and then I'm going to sleep for 3 seconds as it starts typing out the data. And then with the suppress exception, so that even if the next part fails, it doesn't fail the whole script, I'm going to wait for an element to not be visible. This particular element here, the button with data test ID equals stop button, because essentially there's a stop icon that appears as ChatGPT is typing so that it finishes its typing before you send in any more queries. So if that fails, or if it succeeds, this wait for, then it's going to go on to the next part no matter what, and it's going to find the element here where it's going to find the chat from the data message author role assistant markdown selector. And then it's going to use a Python library called Beautiful Soup to basically parse that HTML in a pretty way so that it looks nice when you print it out. And then it's going to do the print line that prints all that data to the console. Response from ChatGPT, and then it's going to do soup.replace the new line character with a colon here. This just tidies it up, and then it looks all nice and neat when you finally get to it. So that is that script that we ran there, and we can run it one more time just for fun, because why not? Here we go. chatgpt.com. We're going to compare Playwright to SeleniumBase in under 178 words. And it's going to type a thing, and it's going to talk about speed and performance, but I already showed you the real speed and performance metrics through GitHub Actions that essentially shows you that even if ChatGPT says that Playwright is faster than SeleniumBase, it's not true if you actually look at the raw data itself, because I collected the data and I found that on macOS, SeleniumBase is a whole lot faster than Playwright, and on Linux, roughly the same, depends on what you're doing. And yes, on Windows, Playwright is faster than SeleniumBase, so give Microsoft a win for that one. But otherwise, it's a close call for Linux, and SeleniumBase has a very nice advantage in speed against Playwright on macOS. So that was my exciting presentation, and remember to check out the SeleniumBase page on GitHub for all the information. So for instance, the ChatGPT example that I ran earlier was using the CDP mode feature, which is a stealthy feature that lets you bypass CAPTCHAs and bot detection. And you'll see here links to various YouTube videos that I have from that page, and lots of instructions on what you need to do in order to bypass CAPTCHAs. There's special methods such as UC click CAPTCHA, which lets you bypass a simple Cloudflare CAPTCHA if there is one on a page. There's also regular bot detection defense that basically lets you bypass that bot detection. And all these examples are here. So much. If you just go into the CDP mode folder, which is in the SeleniumBase examples folder, there are just tons of different examples that you can run, such as the ChatGPT example that I ran for you earlier here. So great, that is what I have for this presentation, and be sure to check out the YouTube channel for more exciting SeleniumBase presentations on all the various things that you might be interested in, and I'll see you all next time.